You know, when I think of the greatest offense in football, I'd have to go to the 2019 LSU offense. But if you look at the NFL, it might be, I don't know, Kurt Warner when he was at St. Louis. The Rams had this crazy offense. They were the greatest show on turf. You know, they scored a lot of points. But when you start thinking, just bear with me if you're not a football fan, when you think about the greatest defense, that would have to be the 1985 Bears. I mean, they were the most ferocious defense in the history of the NFL, and they stopped anything trying to run up the middle, anything trying to round the corner. They tackled it, and then they ended up winning the Super Bowl and doing a dance video. But when you look at offense versus defense in the New Testament, Romans is like the greatest offense in the Bible, because Paul is saying this is what the gospel is, and this is what the gospel is, and it's also this, and plus it's also this, and this is the goodness of gospel, and this is what it means, and it is this, and he's so clear. But when we get to the book of Galatians, it's defense. He is saying this is what the gospel isn't. The gospel isn't that, and it's not that, and it's not that, and it's for sure not that. And let me tell you what had happened is that Paul went to this region of Galatia. It's a lot of churches, probably like our 18 campuses around New Life. You know, it's a lot of different churches, and he's preaching the gospel, and he's seeing people get saved. Then he had some people who were like Judaizers, and they were trying to get people to add some law to the grace that they had found. And this whole book, this is what Paul is saying, is that law and grace can't live under the same roof. And so you can't go back to legalism, and you can't go back to trying to perform before God, because that produces insecurity, and that produces pride. And then Paul says right here in the chapter 1, it also produces confusion. So he's going to take a break, and this is what we're going to look at. It's going to start in verse 11 while we're tracking. So I hope you have your Bible. He's going to say, let me just take a break and tell you where I got this gospel of Jesus Christ, this gospel of grace. I want you to know where I got it from. And this is what he said, and I got a couple of points for you too in here. He says, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. He's like, I didn't sit down and get this in a class somewhere. He says, rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. It's like, Jesus taught me all of this himself. That is a very powerful statement. He says, for you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people, and was extremely zealous for the traditions of my father. He's just like, listen to me, I'm going to tell you this. You've got a past. Paul says, I have a past. We all have a past. But he's like, I'm going to show you how beautiful grace is, because I used to be like this, and I'm not like that at all anymore. And this is beautiful. He's talking about his past. Then he hits verse 15 and he goes, but when God. Would you underline that in your Bible? Because this is how you know that you are saved. Is you can say, I used to be like this, and I used to be like that, and I used to be like this, and I hate that I was like that. But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace. All right, let me just stop and just hit a pause here. This is what Paul is saying. The calling of God happened the moment you became in your mother's womb. All of a sudden, in that embryo state, God goes, I got a call on your life. This is from the Old Testament to the New Testament. We see the Old Testament prophet saying, in the womb, God called me. Okay, so this is what you got to know. There's a calling over everybody's life in the womb. God has a plan and purpose for your life. You may say, well, I was an accident. You might have been an accident by some human, but you were never an accident to God. God saw you and go, oh, I got a plan and purpose for them. In the womb is a call, but that call doesn't get activated in life until there's salvation. When I was running from God, I had a sense that God wanted me to be in ministry. And running from the ministry and running from the God went hand in hand. But I will tell you this, when I got saved, then the calling of God started happening in my life. You can't be apart from Jesus and do what you're called to do with your life. So this is what he says, but when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me. Well, that's what happened. That's salvation. He revealed Jesus in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles. I had a calling. It didn't start happening until I got saved. My immediate response was to not consult any human being. I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went into Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus. Now watch this. This is the last thing I'm going to share with you. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted to Cephas, that's Peter, and stayed with him for 15 days. I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brother. I assure you before God that what I am writing to you is no lie. And then he's going to say, I went up to Syria and Cilicia, and I went to all of these other places. So Paul gets saved. He's working on his calling. And this is what I want you to take home with you. And to grow, there were people I met, and there are places I went to. And Paul, this is so significant. Paul said, I spent 15 days with Peter. Now, what do you think happened in those 15 days? It's like 15 days with Peter. He was like, oh my gosh, this man walked with Jesus. I bet you Paul wore Peter out. Well, tell me about this and tell me about this. And how do you think that Paul is going to understand how to treat women? And he writes about it, and how to treat volunteers and people who are serving the gospel. He was, how do we heal the sick? Do we lay hands? What did Jesus do? For 15 days, he's learning everything about the ministry of Jesus. He's just downloading every experience from Peter. And this is what happens after 15 days, okay? Paul becomes a writer of 2/3 of the New Testament, but it also clarified in Peter, I need to do some writing myself. So Peter leaves, and him and Mark sit down, write the Gospel of Mark. It's the Gospel of Mark according to Peter. Peter begins to write letters to the church. Here's my question to you. Who are the people in your life, when you spend time with them, you're downloading Jesus back and forth to each other? And where are the places that you need to go and travel to make that happen? This is how Paul grew, and this is how you grow as well. God bless. You guys have a great day.